In the latest release of Onshape, which was last Friday, we introduced a lot of new things for Render Studio, amongst many things actually. 2.01, which was released last Friday, July 18, had a lot of really amazing things, and one of them, if you made it all the way down this list, was to do with Render Studio, specifically panoramic and stereo rendering. Right. Now, there is a really good example walkthrough in the help documentation. So if you go here, Render Studios, Render Studio examples and resources, you find creating a panoramic output file, which is an EXR or an HDR. And what we've done is really very much a step-by-step of how to get that done. But I thought today I would sort of walk you through a document that I've already set up and show you the main parts. Now, there's a lot of interesting tips and tricks here, I think, just for Render Studio in general, so you might want to take notes for that. Now, the reason you want to do one of these EXR or HDRs for yourself is that they're available. You can go to things like polyhaven.com and download EXRs and HDRs for typical kind of environments. And there's a very large library of them already inserted inside Render Studios, hundreds of them in there. And that's good. So, the thing is, let's talk about EXRs and HDRs for a second. All right, so EXRs and HDRs are really, really good at providing the lighting for the model and for the scene that you're trying to set up. They are not so good at providing the actual imagery of the background. Now, that is the place for a backing plate, and that's a much better way to do things. So really what you're going to need to do is pair up an HDR file or an EXR file, which is pretty much the same thing, and a backing plate. I see too many examples where people are using the EXR as the background, and you can kind of get away with it in some cases, but mostly not, right? So let's talk about them as a lighting source. As you can see in this example here, there's some bright spots and strips and big panels. These are going to provide the lighting to the scene. And other than just using the ones on polyhaven.com or the ones that are in the open source and provided inside Render Studio, how are you going to create this? Well, it's actually a little bit difficult in the past, and this new thing, this new improvement in Onshape allows you to build these models yourself, which is pretty exciting, because what it means is that you can create this EXR file, put it in a document as an EXR file, and share that document to the rest of your company so that other people can use those EXRs and essentially use your lighting setup. Now, again, this is the lighting setup, it's not the background. All right, that is something we'll show you in a minute. So, okay, that is the general thing. So why would you want to do this? Well, in cases like this, so here is a website. I've got nothing to do with this website. I just found it online. And they sell lighting setups, physical hardware setups to light your garage. It's a very nice looking garage, to be sure. Maybe this is for professional detailing or mechanic or car detailing place. And yes, it is actually. Anyway, so this is the physical setup where there's a bunch of strip lights, and some of their other examples show panels like this down the side. I think there's one here. Where is it? Yeah, okay, it says panels that are providing light, and you can see how it provides nice reflections into the car model. So what happens how do you want to, how are you going to set that up in Onshape so that you can reliably, quickly, and easily reuse this lighting setup? Now, the answer is to build this model and then use the EXR generation capability, which is the new panoramic rendering in Onshape. And then you can just replace whatever's inside easily or apply those lights in whatever model you want, right? When you don't have to go around setting up new geometry each time. So let's have a go at that. Here's something I prepared earlier. This is geometry in just an assembly, and let's not get into how I did this, but I did use a couple of techniques. I created a frame which has got strips of surfaces on it as well. So these white things are going to become lights, The grey thing is going to be the frame. And then I created assembly of those frames, and then in context I created these panels. Now again, that's beside the point. You can build this however you like. What I did do though was I used composites parts to model things that have got multiple surfaces in them like this. So this one composite part for the lower panels on the right versus the lower panels on the left. This is going to make it much easier for me to assign appearances to later on in Render Studio, which is where we're going to go now. If I go to Render Studio and I've inserted that light tunnel assembly, you can see here it is, the light tunnel assembly. The next job was to assign light appearances to the relevant pieces of geometry. So you can see in here, actually I've assigned appearances to everything. And these frames I've assigned an aluminum appearance to. And the way that you do that, of course, is with the appearance library down here. Now there's a very important thing I talked about a few times in previous videos, is you can create favorites of, look, if you have a look how many different appearances there are, there's thousands, right? So it's going to be difficult for you to remember where some of these things are. You can search, of course. You can search for aluminum as long as you can spell it in the American way. You can find all sorts of aluminum models or aluminium models, right? But which one is your favorite? Well, mark them as your favorite, right click and say add to my favorites, so that you can just have this very easy, ready to go list. And these are the common ones that I use all the time: aluminum, carbon fiber, glass, some car paint, rubber. That's pretty much the extent. Some polycarbonate and some printing things as well. So this is the kind of extent of my demo model favorites here. So one of the new things that you can do now is just to drag onto a part, and you can see here it's very easy just to pick the entire part now. One of the other improvements we made was to change the behavior of assigning things. Previously, when you dragged it onto a face, it would assign just that face the appearance, but we've made an improvement to make that so much easier, because 99 times out of 100 you're going to be assigning a part it's the same appearance. Right, so that's one of these other improvements that was talked about here in drag and drop appearances. Right, so the other important and the most important light appearance for this example is the light source. Now, if you go down, of course it's in my favorites here, but if you go down into the lighting folder, you'll see there's a large number of lighting appearance models that you can use. You can do different things here, but I've got one favorite one, which is just this thing called light source emitter, and it's got a 7000K color temperature, which is very bright white light. Okay. You can change that later on anyway. So I dragged this property of the appearance onto the parts, and again you can choose the whole part is going to be the composite part, so that it applies this panel all at the same time. Now, just one thing is that when you assign a color or the appearance to it, if you go over here in the appearance panel, you can see some properties for it. And there's the color temperature, 7000. I could change that to daylight, which is a little bit less, and candlelight, which is a lot less. A couple of things, interesting things here, as words of warning. In my case, these pieces of geometry are surfaces. They're not solid models. I just modeled them as surfaces because I'm just modeling just the appearance of them. I'm not going to actually be looking at them in physical space once we do our final rendering. So I just used surfaces. There is a chance that you get the surfaces flipped onto the wrong side. Each surface, again, has a normal that comes out of it, and you want the emission to come out of the correct side. There's a couple of ways you can change that, but again, not going into that right now. The other method you can do is just make it two-sided emission, so the light goes on both sides of the surfaces. Again, we're not going to reflect this off some kind of anything else, so it's really not going to make much difference here you can see one side is black, it's not emitting any light. The other side is very bright, it is emitting the light. So this is correctly set up for me. Right. The other thing you will definitely need to change is the brightness, or the amount of lumens or flux that is coming out of this source. You're going to have to experiment with this so that it kind of looks right. Right. That's part of this whole iterative process. So once you get this number right, and by default it's going to be too low. So for something that's big like this is something like 6 or 7 meters long and 3 meters high. So you're going to have to pump this number up, whatever. It needs to be bigger like that. Now, at the moment, we are not looking at any background here, and the way that you adjust background is through the ViewCube menu. There's this thing called background. And if I enable background, you'll see that, you know, the reason I don't want to have any background is that it doesn't help us here at all. All right, so I've turned the background off. The next thing we're going to do is go into the environment setup and have a look what's going on in here. Now, just like any environment, remember this is step one, right? We're setting up this thing. It has a default standard lighting for the actual environment, and we don't want to use that. What we want to do here is generate all the lights completely from these panels and strips that you can see, the bright ones. So what we can do here is turn off the environment intensity, which is the standard intensity. And you can see here now, everything has gone very, very dark. And this is not supposed to look good at this point. But we're getting there. Now we're nearly done with what we call the craete setup of Render Studio. Really, really a couple of important things come next. Before you start rendering anything, you need to place yourself, and that is using the position and rotation menu here, again from the ViewCube. You're going to get used to this menu here a lot. You're going to be using this one a lot. You might have to use the transform. You'll definitely use this one, and you'll definitely use these two down here in the appearances panel and the environment panel. Anyway, for now we need to position ourselves, and we can do this very, very easily using numbers. So Z is the vertical height. So this is, imagine the camera. Now you've got your camera set on a tripod. You want to put that at something like 100 millimeters, so you can bend down a little bit. And you'll see this thing start to move around. Now the rotation, and this is actually going to be helped a little bit if you've, like me, if you've got a space mouse, you can kind of get this thing set up, you know, by eye, and then see what's doing to what's happening to the numbers there. And when you get things close, it's nice to sort of round them off to 90, 0, 0. You could have used the front view, of course, can't you? Yeah, that would have been a bit easier. Anyway, 1400 here. I do this thing the hard way. Now, X is providing sort of the side-to-side movement. I want to be exactly in the center. And in fact, I want to be exactly in the center of the room in Y as well. So just put that. Now you can't see anything at the moment. And that's fine, because what we're going to do is render this as a spherical projection onto a rectangular surface, if that makes any sense. Now, so to do that, you go to the render scene, and we're going to do a custom, and we want to do a custom ratio 2:1, very, very important here. I'm going to pump this up a little bit to say 2000 pixels. We are going to do an EXR output. We're going to disable the tone mapping. This is really important. I'll tell you why in a minute. And the final thing is to choose the panoramic option. Now you can see here, this has gone into this distorted view. I think there was an example of, yeah, you can see here, this is characteristic of when you're looking at one of these EXRs or HDRs. It's going to look like this distorted, spherical distortion, you know, on this rectangular image, 2:1 image. You might want to screen cap this, although it is in the notes, in the help. Yeah, you probably don't need to do anything there. Because now this number here, it's not going to really help you to go too much higher because again, we're using these here as light sources for other renderings in another render studio. So there's no point in having an 8K or a 16K or something massive like that. 2K is probably more than enough for something like this. Now the tone mapping is important to disable so that when you use when you use this environment in another render studio, you don't have to do crazy things with the intensity and play games with the tone maps in the other place. So disable the tone map, check on panoramic, render it. Now this is going to create an EXR file like this in your document. And in this case, which I did before, but it was the same 2K size, it was a 9 megabyte file, so no big deal. Now, sidebar here, what a really cool idea is to do is that once you've got these EXR files that you like, gather them together in one document and make that sort of your library of EXRs. And then you can share that with other people. So rather than having to import into your document or your new document each time, you can actually just do a referential link to these EXRs. And there's another benefit of how the way the document linking works in Onshape. Right, so now we have our EXR. We're going to be able to use it in any other render studio. And it's going to mimic the lighting that we kind of set up here. All right. So we're halfway there, but before we go and create the rendering, we need a couple of things. Firstly, I'm going to bring in a couple of PNGs or JPEGs or images that are going to act as my background. These are just regular photos that were taken with the camera. Now, ideally, you want this to be as high a resolution as possible. Use a raw image or a raw JPEG from the camera. And you're going to get a couple of pieces of information at the same time. Firstly, what was the sort of lens that was used and what sort of the camera was used? Was it full frame? Was it a crop frame? Something like that. So if you don't know that, you're going to have to guess. And in this case, I don't know, so I'm going to have to guess. I'm going to have to guess the field of view or the sort of the kind of lens, whether it's a 35mm lens, 28mm lens, so on and so forth. This looks pretty wide angle, as does this one. So this is more like probably 35, maybe 28mm lens, just from looking at it here. Now, again, this is purely a JPEG image, and we're going to use that as the background, but we're going to get the lighting from this EXR file that we created earlier. Okay, that's the cool bit. Now, before we do the actual final rendering, what we also need is some geometry. So I've used this Perrin 424 model, which is available, and it's a public document. So it just looks really cool. And without offending any particular brands, by using their cars, I'm going to use the 424 Perrin one because they're excellent people. Excellent people. Right, so now we've got this. We're going to create a render studio, and I've just brought in, inserted the 424 assembly, and I've started assigning some appearances, just like before. If I zoom in, I'll show you that I've got kind of a really nice, again in my library and my favorites, I've got carbon fiber, coated carbon fiber, which is what I'm using for these sort of top panels. And I'm using maybe a little bit of over-the-top solid car paint. It's a little bit shiny. So just a tip for realism, nothing is really that shiny. Nothing is that perfect. Certainly if you've ever owned a black car, you'll know that you'll never keep it looking like this for very long. As the owner of a black car, I can testify to this. Anyway, so the way to get some more realism is to find the appearance that is assigned to that, and you can sort of select all entities just to make sure that, yeah, that's the one there. You can rename these. Sometimes when you use them multiple times, you have multiple copies, so you just rename that body. And if you go over to the appearance panel, you see here a lot of controls, including the color. In fact, let's make this a different color. Let's try it as red. Oh yeah. See, now it's way too shiny. It's way too shiny. So if we go back to black, there's some things in here that you might want to change. And one of them is the clear coat. This is a multi-layer appearance. And you might want to pump up a little bit of the roughness here. And I think, maybe 0.15 roughness. You'll see how, well, that's maybe too rough. So again, this is to your taste. Just having a little bit of roughness on the clear coat of that can help a lot. Anyway, that's your taste. Maybe you want it really shiny. All good there. Right, so you can see here, as in any scene, the standard setup that comes with every scene in Render Studio is this thing that we call standard. It's a standard image, and it's got a few boxes of light on the ceiling, and there's a few little dots here from some kind of small lights that are also on the ceiling. That's just the standard kind of studio that we put things in by default. And, it looks really good. There are many others that you could use. You could go down to your library of environments here, and you can see all of these indoor and outdoor, and there's some indoor ones here. These are all pretty complicated setups, to be honest, right? And there's some that might be, there's a garage one here which has got a few lights on it, which might be good. So we're not taking the easy way out here. We're doing our own, which actually we've done the work. What we need to do here is we just need to choose custom image. And we're going to load that EXR file that we just created earlier. And you can see here it's a link. You can link it to an external document, or you can link it to something in this version here. So it's linked to a version. It's come from a particular version. Just be aware of that when you're doing these. When you see this link, it means it's coming from a version, and if you make some changes to it, it's not going to update automatically unless you choose the new version of it here. So this looks a little bit cooler, right? Because we've got these you can see all these light strips, and arguably we should have made the panels a little bit brighter to give a little bit more definition, but maybe not, right? So that's kind of, so this is just a really first thing out of the box, and maybe using our EXR, this is what we want. So I've saved a couple of views. And views, when you make named views in Onshape Render Studio, there's a lot more going on than just the position of the camera. In fact, you can select all of the properties by default. So whether it'll keep the background, the clipping, the tone mapping, the field of view of camera. This field of view is where we have to match the lens that was used if we're going to put a proper background in. Depth of field also. All right, so that is going to be necessary for this next step when we change the background. So changing the background is as easy as going from a solid color of white to choosing an image. Now this image might be something, one of those that we uploaded before, okay? So here it is, and clearly this is in the wrong place, so it helps to have a space mouse, but if you don't, you can still do this fairly rapidly. Now with a space mouse, it's sort of laughably easy, it's really cool, but you can actually do this just by using the position and rotation menu and getting things set up. So again, having these things at nice round numbers, can sometimes help. Yeah. Now it's still a little big perhaps, so we need to set our distances here. Maybe the Y distance needs to be in the middle more. Yeah, whatever, like that. I do have a couple of named views set up. So I think this one here was LT1. Pretty close to what I just manually did, but this LT1 is, let's see what that position looked like. Okay, so I'm I'm kneeling down a little bit more. My tripod is a little bit lower at 1100 1.1 meters. I'm back 4.5 meters from the center of the room, which sounds about fair enough. And I'm rotating a little bit down, right? So my camera is pointing down at the, this was an interesting kind of takeaway. The camera was not absolutely level. Having a look at the background image, it kind of makes sense when you do it like that. All right. Couple of things while we're here. There's an option for infinite size versus horizontal versus not infinite size. Now, again, you're not using the EXR or HDR as the background, you're just using it as the lights. Everything you see in here is purely from the background JPEG that we added, the backing plate, so-called. Everything on the model, the lighting on the model, the shadows, the reflections, all of that stuff is coming from the EXR file. So that's what sort of the duality you're working at here. Now you can work with the ground height just to make sure that you don't sink the wheels through the ground if necessary, otherwise just leave it on automatic. And the final thing you might want, or there's two final things you might want to work with. The intensity. Now if for some reason you want to change the intensity, you can. Make it really dark, you don't want to do that. Make it too bright, that doesn't look good either. Usually, if you've got your first setup correct, then 1 is going to be the answer. The way that you want to make tweaks is going to be in the tone mapping here. So again, through the View Cube menu, there's a thing called tone mapping. So field of view was also here. So I discovered that it was a 24mm lens that was used for here. So I just typed in 24. But tone mapping here. Now tone mapping kind of, it looks like it's trying to mimic operating a camera. So you can choose photographic style, and it's the best way to do it is with photographic style. You can change the f-stop. So if you make a wider f-stop, it'll make it brighter. Like this. This is just the image inside. You can see how now it's gone a bit dark, and if I go to something like 2.8, I'm going to overexpose it. So overexposing is something you want to avoid in here. You can also change the tone and contrast. So if you want to boost highlights, or compress highlights, or boost or compress shadows. So if we go to a small value of the shadows, watch what happens in areas that are very, very dark. You start to get a little bit more detail in there. So generally, where you've got these shadows, it's going to bring out a little bit more detail. And the final one is with the this advanced settings. Now you can, if you know, right? But there's different compression variants that can be applied, and they will give different results. You can see here some of it looks a little bit more natural than others, and the Slater, the PBR, physics-based rendering neutral, is the probably the one of choice, I think, for the most realistic kind of tones that you're going to get out of it. So tone mapping is here. We've got a nice image. I'm going to show you one other image, and because we're pretty much done at this point. I've got one other image saved in the background, which is this other background. Now, this wasn't a very good quality JPEG, but I'm just using it for now. We maybe need to bump up that intensity a little bit for this particular image. Yeah, something like this. And now once you've got it in here, I mean, of course you could rotate it if you wanted to. Like that. Once you've got it in here, now it's time just to do a regular rendering, and you render it from whatever, but just make sure that you're not using panoramic and EXR anymore. We're just rendering it to a PNG, and then we're all done. So hopefully you by this point would have been able to create some really nice outputs, like either without the backing plate or with the backing plate, like these ones. These are the examples that I created with the setup that I showed you today. Good luck with that. It's a lot of fun, and it's a very, very powerful thing inside Onshape Render Studio.